We're picking back up on God Will Work With You, But Not For You, A Living Philosophy by Lau Russell. Chapter 17, Character. If you could see a sculptor at work upon a head, you would be fascinated with the gradual appearance of character from the characterless mass of clay. Gradually the eyes, nose, and mouth began to shape themselves into the strong features of a well-known statesman. It would amaze you at some stages of the work to see tiny change in the line of the mouth, or the upturn at its corners, or just a little more clear-cut firmness given to it. A slight touch here and there in the forehead and cheeks, and especially the eyes, and the strength of a great character emerges from the shapeless clay. Perhaps you may not realize that you are sculpturing your own features that way. You started as a baby with a perfectly characterless face and body. What you look like today is what you have sculpted the clay of your body to become. If there is firmness and strength of great character there, you have been the sculptor of it. If there is weakness and vacillation, there you also molded that into your features. All men and women sculptured themselves in their own image. Perhaps you have not thought of that. Most people who do not give much thought to it vaguely imagine that they are created to look as they look. They think that they just grew that way. That is not right thinking. Everyone looks different because he has a different type of body. But the character and expression are different only because people think differently. From the moment you are born, your own human nature and your character begin to impress your individuality upon your whole body. Every thought you think is just like one movement of the sculptor's fingers upon his clay, which turns the corners of your mouth up or down to depict a cheerful person or an ugly one. Children have very little character in their faces because they have not lived long enough to have sufficient experiences in their lives to make character. Even at an early age, however, you can tell what kind of character the grown-up child will be by what he thinks and what he does. If I see a boy spending hour after hour looking at television or keeping the radio turned on all the time, I know what he will look like when he grows up. He will not be bright-looking nor keen and intelligent, for he wants to be enlightened all the time from sources outside of himself. Even though he does look at television quite a little, one boy will choose programs which have something of a cultural value, while another boy would turn these off and choose the sensational programs. If your children are inventive and have imagination, they will spend their time in making things instead of forever seeking to be amused from sources outside of themselves. Boys or girls of 10 have strong beginnings of character if they are only but they are only the beginnings. Up to 14 years of age, your children are most pliable. You can help them to mold their own character better before than after that age. As the twig is bent, so is the tree inclined. After 14, the wood of the tree is too firm for easy bending. Although if you see boys or girls who are very busy all the time doing something, making little cakes and dolls or kites and toy planes, you know that they will be more resourceful and self-sufficient when they grow up than the boys or girls who never know what to do and want to be taken somewhere or to be shown what to do. The amount of character is already molded into their features by themselves. You must not make the mistake of judging all children alike, however. There are the dreamers who think inwardly and find a sufficiency within themselves. These are often mistaken for subnormal children when, in fact, they are the reverse. The reason they may not be so active of body is because they are active of mind. They have keen imaginations and are never so happy as when they are left alone with their own imaginings. When you see such qualities in children, you may well count upon it that they would make poor business executives, but would be excellent creators in the fine arts or designing professions. Many such children suffer untold agony because of not being understood by their families. Every young girl wants to look beautiful. How many thousands of times every teenage girl looks in the mirror and wishes she was as beautiful as some other girl she knows. The way to look beautiful is to have beautiful thoughts. No one can help being beautiful if one thinks beautiful thoughts. No one can prevent himself from looking ugly if he has ugly thoughts. Have you ever seen a sister of mercy or a nun who is not beautiful? No matter what her features are, she is always beautiful. Nuns' lives are dedicated to giving loving service to others. Love is modeled into their every feature. They cannot help becoming the image of their own thinking. I remember when I was about 17, girls of my age dreaded growing old. Usually they considered a woman of 40 as being very old. I would silently watch the woman of 35 and 40 or more and think how beautiful and poised she was, and think how wonderful it would be when I reached 35. I have always thought of young, pretty girls as pretty, mature women as beautiful. I always thought of young girls as pretty, mature women as beautiful, and old ladies as lovely. Pretty young girls have not had the necessary emotions of life as yet to make them beautiful, for beauty is not just in form alone. Beauty is dependent entirely upon how much love a woman has put into her thinking. A woman may have a face as pretty as a doll and be a repellent if she has led a selfish or cynical life. I have seen many doll-like beautiful women who had deceit and treachery written into every line on their face. On the other hand, I have seen very plain women who were supremely beautiful because of the love they gave to the world. Love is the greatest sculpture of beauty. Florence Nightingale gave love from out of her saintly nature for many years. She was not a beautiful woman in feature, as the world judges beautiful women, and her countenance was luminous with a Madonna light which inspired one who was fortunate enough to be uplifted by it. I remember a woman of about 40 who was in our choir when I was a young girl. She had prematurely white hair which came to her suddenly because of a great sorrow. Everyone in the audience looked at her with much more interest than any of the young girls. They did that, for there was more character of beauty in her face than in the younger characterless faces. And her beautiful white hair was truly her crowning glory. Naturally, the same principles which apply to women in age and appearance also apply to men. Personally, I have always thought that the older a man grows, the more handsome he becomes. For verification of this, look over some old photographs of men you know. Even though they may have had the handicap of losing all of their hair, they still look much more handsome than as young men with shocks of curly hair. My husband became the world's most famous painter of children. Almost overnight, he found that he could no longer continue to paint them, for he craved to express the great beauty of older people who had lived useful, creative lives. Everyone wondered why he could possibly do such a thing as to give up painting beautiful, innocent, young, opening buds of life, after he had so masterfully conquered the subtleties demanded by such subjects. His answer was that he tired of painting maps upon which the emotions of a lifetime are going to be impressed. They ceased to inspire him. He craved painting faces upon which the emotions of a lifetime had been impressed, instead of the blankness of mere prettiness. He once said that there is more inspiring beauty in the face of an old, wrinkled peasant woman who has mothered 7 children under great difficulties than there is in the most beautiful woman in the world who has lived for herself alone. What character is there in the calm ocean as compared with the tempest tossed waters of roaring winds and crashing waves on rock-bound shores? What opportunity for character is there in the face of the insulated office clerk as compared with the explorer of African or Brazilian jungles? We can perhaps say that the face of a gently bred man whose background is the drawing room of social life is more handsome but is more interesting. I often recall Barry, the, the famous English playwright, saying that a plain woman with charm is more beautiful and attractive than a beautiful woman who is without charm. Why is that? Charm comes from giving love out of oneself to others. It lies in the consideration and thoughtfulness shown to others, and more especially in cheerfulness of disposition which uplifts everyone with whom a person of character comes in contact. I know of a woman who had great charm when she was with her close friends and immediate family. She seemed to lose it completely when she was with strangers. This worried her very much, for she was always the wallflower at parties, had great difficulty with dinner parties who ignored her and talked to their companions on the other side. She gradually developed a strong inferiority complex because of it, even though she was very beautiful, not yet 30, and a musician of repute. One day she confided her troubles to me, and I told her that all of her troubles were the effects of one simple fault. I said, "You are afraid of people, especially men." "That is nonsense. I love to be with all people, men and women. I am not afraid of them," she replied. "If you are not afraid of them, why do you draw slightly back when you are introduced to any stranger?" I asked. There is no more repelling gesture in the lexicon of how to be friends with anyone than that. You have a most chilling reserve with all strangers. I noticed it when you were introduced to our guests. If you would just reverse that attitude and lean forward when you are greeting others who lean forward to greet you, your troubles would end that instant. "Try it," I said. She did try it, and very conscientiously. Hardly a week passed before she felt a great difference in her life. She no longer had any difficulty in holding her dinner partners when she leaned just a little forward toward them in the natural way of friends, instead of always drawing back even ever so slightly. Very soon she had admirers and boxes of flowers. Soon she married a very prominent man. When we last heard of her, she said that her most important thing was trying to give to her children was the most important thing she was trying to give to her children was charm. The greatest mistake one who is growing old can make is to dread it and try to evade it by any artificial means whatsoever, beyond those which good care demands. White hair is beautiful when the time comes for white hair. To dye white hair black or red, as countless women do, is to rob themselves of the character and charm which makes old age so lovely and interesting, instead of improving one. It has the opposite effect of making one look as artificial as a lily would be if one painted it. Probably the greatest crime in this respect is to lift one's face by a surgical operation. All too frequently one looks positively grotesque who has thus tried to reverse the effects of time by taking all the glory and wonder away from her face. A well-known woman in musical circles had raven black hair, which won her so many compliments that she felt her world was coming to an end when white hairs first appeared in the beautiful blackness. To delay it even a little, she dyed those few white hairs, but she could never stop dyeing them as they increased in number. It was not noticeable for years, but it came very noticeable, and then conspicuously so. She could not bear to allow herself to change, however, even though she ceased to hear the compliments which gave her such pleasure in her earlier years. When she passed well into her 70s, she had an illness which kept her in hospitals for months. And still more months of convalescing. During that period, her hair became its natural snow white, and she then again received many compliments for the loveliness of her hair. She had not realized that she was working against nature, which was trying to keep her always beautiful, as she was preventing nature from doing that. Another interesting story I remember in connection with growing older is about a woman whose sweetheart of 20 years before, who was then financially unable to marry her, wrote that he was now returning as a wealthy man. In the meantime, she had been unhappily married, and the experience had sculpted its lines on her face, and her once blonde hair was streaked with white. Her first thought upon receiving this letter was that he would be shocked when he saw her, he would think for he would be thinking of her as she was 20 years ago. She decided she must dye her hair blonde again and have her face lifted to get rid of the aging lines. He telephoned her from the station when he arrived, and the joy that they both felt told its own story. Her heart beat fast as she opened the door to let him in. There stood a fine-looking middle-aged man with hair graying at the temples and with the warmth of naturalness that comes with age. He looked hard into her face and with a growing look of incredulity said, "Why, Elizabeth, you you have not changed at all." The mature romance he had returned to find had somehow disappeared, for this young-looking woman was not what he wanted now. He wanted a mature woman who could share all things with him. Life had not touched this woman, and he felt she would not be able to give him the richness of the love he sought. The lesson of this story is that as people grow old, they forget that all their friends grow old with them. When one of them tries to look younger by artificial means, the naturalness of growth and friendship is strained. When one grows old gracefully with nature and time, nature always works with them to sculpture whatever character they have become into their bodies. The idea of import which lies back of this idea is that everyone has become the image of his own thinking. He may not have become what he wants to be because he may not have been willing to put forth the effort of becoming what he wants to be. In that case, you see other characteristics in his features. You see frustration, weakness, vacillation, and laziness there. You do not see in such a face the strength of a man who will grow out to get what he wants with love for the very effort of it. The world is so full of people who have tremendous desires which they wish to obtain by wishful thinking or by having someone else make it easy for them. Such people who desire to become great characters can become great characters by making the necessary effort. That is the only way anyone can become great. Desire alone is not sufficient. I often think of a woman who is now a well-known writer who started her career as a stenographer but desired more than anything else to write good fictional stories for adaptation for movies. Every evening and way into the night, she wrote her stories. Finally, one was accepted by a leading magazine. That was her beginning, but it still meant months, perhaps years, of giving every evening to her writing. She had the strength of character necessary for achievement and eventually wrote a fine story that she sold to another leading magazine and for which she also received $50,000 for the film rights. How many people say they could write fine stories if they only had the time or the money to study? This woman had neither, but she had an indomitable desire and belief in herself that nothing could quench. Only sheer hard work brought fruition to her desires. The personal director of any great industry becomes very proficient in judging the character into which people sculpture themselves. One young man, freshly graduated from school, was shown into the director's room. Instead of waiting for the first question to come from the director, he said, "I am answering your advertisement for men. What are the hours and what do you pay? Young man, I am afraid you have very much to learn in life, but we have no time to teach it to you here," the director replied as he asked his secretary to show the next applicant in. A good personnel man can look over 50 applicants without personally interviewing any of them and eliminating two-thirds of them without taking time for interviews. Upon those whom he eliminates are the unmistakable signs of lack of initiative, laziness, slowness of movement and speech, which also means slowness of thinking. 9 out of 10 of them are men or women who just want jobs and have no realization that their job is their opportunity for self-expression. These are the clock watchers who do as little for their money as they have to, excuse me. These are the clock watchers who do as little for their money as they have to, instead of the rare few who do more than is expected of them for sheer love of work. Every man who is on the lowest rung of the ladder of any industry has a good chance as any other one to become its president. Any good reader of character can look over all of those who are on the lower rungs and pick out one here and there out of hundreds. These are the ones who always get to the top, for they always make good at every stage of their advancement. That is the way the great industries find their strong men. Strength is written in them when they come, even as office boy, and the strength of character grows stronger year by year. One who has it always adds one who has it always adds to it. He never subtracts from it. In every industry, just as in every town, there are people who are very jealous of the success of others. These are the people of lesser ability than their co-workers or neighbors. These people develop strong cases of inferiority complexes and begin in subtle ways to underrate those who are superior to them. They cast little innuendos which are intended to belittle those of whom they are jealous. What is known as the plant gossip or the town gossip is the fruit of such mediocre people. No more pitiable and despicable traits exist in nature than in human gossip. Unlike the man who attacks you with a sword, from whom you have a chance to defend yourself, the gossip attacks her or his victims unseen. There is no way of protecting yourself from their viciousness. A good description of a gossip would be a human being with a serpent's tongue. That very appropriately describes one because their talking always stings. It is a strange fact that gossips gradually sculpture their features into serpent-like characteristics. Those who can read character in faces always distinguish the in, invariate habitual gossip. Gossips allow gossip to Gossips always gossip to court favor for themselves. Their inferiority complex compels them to tear people down to their position. Their inferiority complex compels them to tear people down to a position inferior to themselves or to an unmoral condition of contempt in order to exalt themselves. It is not too complimentary to human nature that gossips find many ready listeners who drink gossip in eagerly and repeat it with much embroidery supplied by their imaginations. It is that eager pleasure which listeners to gossip exhibit with which encourages them to return again and again with later news about their victims. It may be comforting to your philosopher friend to assure you that no gossip can hurt you. That is true from a long-range point of view, but the immediate effect is very often cruelly hurtful. The story of the young girl who committed suicide because a gossip who saw her return home at 2 a.m. with a married man from the next town spread it so far and fast that she was practically ostracized by her entire neighborhood. Her death brought out the fact that she had been to a birthday dance party given by a friend in another town, and her friend's father had driven her home. From a purely philosophical point of view, no gossiper or slanderer can hurt you in theory, for truth is stronger than untruth and becomes uppermost in the long run. That may be comforting also from the long-range point of view, but gossipers can ruin one's business, break up homes, and destroy one's peace of mind over long intervals before the untruth of the gossipers can be known. In the meantime, some victims can never recover. All of this brings us back to the one great fact of life, that love alone survives and love alone is loved. He who loves is loved. He who gives love, to him love is regiven. He who loves is the master sculptor who creates love in his own image. Any man who would succeed in the world can succeed in measure in which the light of love can be seen written upon his countenance and glowing in his eyes. He who has sculpted love into his face cannot fail to be loved and honored by all men, no matter what his features are like, or even though his body may be deformed. The whole world loved and honored Charles Proteus Steinmetz. What a genius. The world-famous electrical genius and humanitarian, to whom men of Edison's status paid deep homage, and Tesla. He was the man who perfected Tesla's AC generator. Without Steinmetz, we wouldn't have electricity as we know today. Steinmetz was a hunchback, but the sheer beauty of his character so deeply inspired anyone with whom he came into contact that his deformity was hardly noticed. He not only loved his work, but loved people. Deeply etched in his features were not only the evidences of a meditative life, which characterizes the inner thinker, but also the love which characterizes those who love all people and all things. The greatest and most beautiful character who ever lived is the one who most people loved, is the one who most loved the world. It mattered not what his features were like, whether his hair was red or black, or whether he was tall or short. His would be the most beautiful face of all in the world, because love and beauty are one, and both were consummate in him. When you study the face of a man like Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, you see great strength in their very beautiful faces. But it is not the strength that makes them beautiful. It is the love for humanity and the consequent beauty of thought which does it. Lincoln's features were not at all well constructed. If Lincoln had not sculpted love upon that otherwise unattractive clay, it would be a very far stretch of the imagination to see beauty in it. You can see hundreds of his type without giving them a second glance. They are all of them Lincoln types in body only. Lincoln sculpted love into his clay and thus immortalized it with an enduring beauty which will awaken love in all those who seek his likeness forever. Strength without love can never make a beautiful character, no matter how great he may become. I have in mind one of the strongest characters in the world. I have in mind one of the strongest characters the world has ever known. He had strength of a man whom you know would get anything he set out to get, or would accomplish anything he set out to accomplish. Such strength as that does not mean, however, that he is a beautiful character, or it could indicate a sinister or ominous or selfish character whom you might fear to have dealings with, or would at least be on your guard against. When you meet that type of strong man, you cannot possibly be drawn to him as you would be to a Benjamin Franklin. The mere fact of having to live life with other people compels you to read the character of every life you come in contact with. Our very civilization compels this from us. For every person we come in contact with can affect our lives to the extent we permit him to affect it, and not beyond. If you or I are not a good judge of character, or permit people to enter our lives in any degree of association whatsoever, we are openly inviting that character to sculpture his thoughts upon our lives, our homes, our businesses, or our friendships. If you employ a houseworker, even though she has a kindly, honest face, but has in it a weakness which indicates inefficiency or laziness, and your home is not as beautifully dusted as you would do it, your servant is writing her environment upon yours to your detriment. Likewise, if an industrialist employs managers and foremen who are hardworking, selfish men, excuse me. Likewise, if any industrialist employs managers and foremen who are hard driving, selfish men to run his plant, even though they may have much knowledge and efficiency, the character of the plant is what they make it. Even though the character of the employer is not like theirs, you may therefore sculpture efficiency and strength and similar qualities into the image you are making of yourself, and not become the kind of person whom a better judge of character would employ to manifest him. You do not compliment a man by describing him as a strong man, quite as much as you do when you describe him as a fine man. The connotation of love is the description of a man as being fine, whereas the strong man description could as well apply to a Hitler as to a Lincoln. To become a fine, strong character should be the supreme desire of every man who lives. First, however, comes the quality of love. All other qualities, such as efficiency, alertness, initiative, and resourcefulness, which are built upon the basic quality of love, increase the measure of what he has sculpted into the image of himself. He may have all the other qualities, but without love sculptured in them, he is poor indeed, and will remain so until the end of his days. Look into your mirror and study the image you have created by your thinking. Is that the image you intended to create? Are you the kind of person you want to be? The reflection you see in that mirror is the individual you have created. Out of 50 men in a department, why is it that one is selected to fill the vacancy of manager and not any of the others can even be considered? Why is it that out of over 150 million people, it is very difficult to find 10 men whom the people of the country would feel happy and confident about becoming their president? The answer is because the men who are chosen are the men whose thoughts and actions have expressed great desire to manifest power and love than others who are not chosen. Every man determines his own destiny by what he thinks and does every moment of his life. You can become what you want to be only through your thoughts and actions, but the measure of your desire must be great in order for you to become great. Hitch your wagon to a star and fasten its bolts with deep desire to manifest love, and behold, its wings will carry you to those heights. No one who has ever reached those heights has ever done so by himself alone. He who loves is aware of love working with him. God is love. Love is the foundation of the universe. He who deeply loves is deeply humble. The greatest the greatest men in the world are those who are most humble. An arrogant man is one who asserts his personal ego, while a humble man is one who suppresses it and is, therefore, without arrogance. The quality of humility is that which gives to one the gentleness and tenderness of a spiritual strength which can be best described as saintly. The universe of love is a universe of law, for love is the law. He who works with the law of love is working with the universe, and the universe is working with him. Remember always that the universal love is limitless, and you are the universe. And that's it for today.